RuneScape has been a game that's been out for over 21 years at this point, and it was bound to happen that certain content just wouldn't be relevant anymore today in 2022. But should it be, or should it just stay a relic from the past? Let's talk about it. Yo, what's going on guys? My name's Chevalric, and today we're going to be talking about content in RuneScape that's no longer relevant, that's no longer alive, that's no longer up to today's standards, either graphically, mechanically, or just people just don't interact with it for any other reason, really. And if it should be changed, if they should quote-unquote fix old content before they release new content, or should they just move on? Because that is also something they could do, and they're actually doing. We'll get into that. But if you're going to enjoy this video, definitely go give it a like. It generally really helps me out. Join in the discussion in the comment section down below. Let me know, do you think that they should fix old content first? Or do you think they should just move on? And please do consider that, you know, fixing old content does have an impact on the game in general, which we'll be discussing, of course, in this video. But obviously, try to give some, like, good reasoning and not just, like, from a nostalgia point of view, like, oh yeah, I love Castle Wars, I want them to revive it. But do you actually think that it could be revived in 2022, for example? Just very curious. Let me know in the comment section down below. Subscribe if you're new. Let's get into the video. So, recently, Jagex did another live stream with the RS guy. I swear to you, honestly, I just quote these live streams pretty much at like every weekly video at this point. But for some reason, it just really go well with the topics I've already written down, certain ones even for months. And, you know, they talked about how they look at old content and if they should revitalize it or revive it, or if it should just stay a relic in the past. And this is what they said.
Our philosophy the last couple of years has been something we've called internally progressive balancing.
Okay.
So progressive balancing is where we sort of like don't take into account older pieces of content as much as we used to. So old content exists as a legacy. You can go back and play it and it still has its niches and still viabilities, but it's not there to be held up anymore by...
Okay.
It's not like that content has been and gone. It had its place, it had its time, much like the much great VHS tapes. It had its place in its time, CDs as well. They had their time. There's no point in trying to uphold these older pieces of content.
Yeah, so they pretty much said that, you know, old content will just remain a relic from the past, and it's just a nice memory, something we look back on fondly, and they are not really wanting to do anything with it. And I'm gonna be honest, I kind of agree with them, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But they did state, however, that they are willing to look at old pieces of content if they need some extra content tying into new content. And I know that sounds a bit vague, obviously, because what do you mean by that? But look at Zamorak, for example. They needed components, and they, you know, obviously consciously picked the components that come from Hellware and Vindicta to make certain codexes and certain upgrades that came from that. And obviously the rings and the Nightmare Gauntlets, etc., does raising the prices of those items and increasing the relevancy of the monsters that drop those items. Because let's be honest, relevancy in RuneScape is literally tied to either XP rates or GP an hour. And fun in today's game, which obviously is a whole topic on its own, Efficiency-scape, is something that, I mean, it's still in the game, but obviously, like most people, like if something is fun and you get like 20k GP an hour, then people would not do that over something that will make them 10 million GP an hour. Probably. I mean, if you do, shout out to you, by the way. Just big respect for you. But overall, like, it's something that I like. I like that mindset myself. I do really think that is the way forward, because I feel like that's where the issue comes with old school RuneScape. And I feel like I'm just starting to become someone who bashes old school RuneScape, and I mention it, and I will keep on mentioning it because I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I played old school RuneScape, 2K total, blah blah blah. You get the gist. If you've been here, you've been known, and you're probably saying like, oh Chev, yeah, we know, blah blah. But for the people who don't, like, I have played old school RuneScape excessively. I love the game, it's great, but I think my biggest problem and flaw with that game is the way they introduce content, because they never want to devalue the old content that's in the game. And I think that is really holding that game back from its true potential. And I think if it makes sense, like how they did with, for example, the introduction of Torva in old school RuneScape, where you need Bandos to make Torva, because, you know, that also makes sense, you know, lore-wise, I believe, with like Nex and Bandos and whatever. And I do like that. It doesn't even have to make sense lore-wise, but in that way you keep that armor relevant. It even went up in price. But at the same time, you introduce it in a way that makes sense, and you have a new powerful set of armor. But on the other hand, you have things like Justiciar and the other one that comes from that Nightmare boss. And honestly, that is just, to me personally, like, I'm just like, why would I spend hundreds of millions of just getting like 2 extra crush bonus or getting just the best? I personally, as a casual, don't care for it, and I'm obviously the metagamers do. But that is just mainly to not devalue bundles at the time and not to, make bundles completely irrelevant. And to kind of go back to RuneScape 3, that's what I love about their updates. They're just like, you know what? Have the Fractured Staff of Armadale, the absolute new best in slot staff. And, it turned out to actually make other things more relevant, like Greater Concentrated Blast went up in price because, it was just good in general. And for this switch with Wand and Orb, it was really good. Obviously, the Greater Sunshine ability right now is a lot of money because everyone's using Mage. All the rune prices went up in price. Even the Mage armor went up in price as well. And it just affected everything. Look at Greater Chain as well. Greater Chain literally went from like 150 mil to 500 mil. It is making so much content relevant because this new powerful weapon has synergy with other things. And we talked about that on the channel before. And I think that really goes for fixing old content. Like, imagine if you needed, like, the Armadale Battle Staff, as people were thinking, to get the Practice Staff of Armadale, like the upgrade, like an add-on, whatever. Like, it would just artificially make Glaciers relevant, and you could say that is a good thing, and it could make sense. But look, I don't want to say, like, hours and hours and hours and hours of Glaciers to be able to get the best slot staff. I just want to go to the boss and get it, and I think that's what a lot of people feel like. And there's even another argument to be made about old content. Like why you should not fix it is, a lot of people always have an outcry about graphical updates on older areas. I think Karamja, and it needs it, don't get me wrong, Karamja needs a graphical overhaul, but the thing is, why would you do such a thing? Obviously, every single piece of content that Jagex will develop for RuneScape 3 will require development time, energy, time, effort, whatever. Let's say they dedicate time to graphically update Karamja, which obviously will take time and effort, etc., thus taking away from other projects. There's nothing really you can add to Karamja, really, that would make sense for content. Like, think about it. What is really on Karamja right now, besides some clue steps, a few low-level quests? Obviously, the Fire Cape is there, I guess, and I guess the Fight Kiln too, but besides that, there's nothing really much that you can add to that area. And thus making it, even if they graphically update it, let's say they release it today. Today is a Monday when I'm recording this, and I would see it in the update block. I would be like, oh, cool, I would check it out. And then, walk around Karamja, probably make a video about my opinions or something, and then only go back there when I need to be there for a clue scroll. Because that is it. And you could say, okay, they could artificially fill up that area with content, but then again, does that make sense? Does that feel right within the game? Or is that content better suited to a new area or a more fitting area than just being like, oh, we need content, so we'll just put it into Karamja? And I understand that people would love to see old content being fixed, whether that's because of nostalgia or it's because it's outdated or it's old and, it doesn't make sense anymore and it kind of hinders the, enjoyment. Like, for example, I'm not saying that the early quests, like for example Trinome Village or the Fight Arena quest, should be difficult, but you can pretty much 2 or 3 hit those enemies with Mage right now because their health has never been balanced, and I think that's more of a balancing issue than an actual design issue. But obviously those areas look a bit old and dated, especially around the Fight Arena, and sure, I would love to see an update for it, but then again, it is also content you probably interact with once, and do you want them to spend, I don't know, like a month's development time onto an area that you will go to once or twice throughout your gameplay? Or do you want them to introduce something completely new that is way more relevant in today's meta? Because you gotta understand as well, the RuneScape players have changed. As I mentioned earlier in this video, people don't really do things for fun anymore. And I can see comments talking about minigames already because it's something that kind of always gets brought up when I kind of talk about anything that's semi-related to this subject is minigames. People are like, oh yeah, I would love to see minigames revived again, but then again, you have to introduce proper rewards or proper XP rates to those minigames for people to really want to be doing it, because people don't play the game really for fun anymore. And obviously, I hope when you're watching this video, you're someone who plays the game and has fun, but people don't play it just purely for fun. Like, as kids, we would just go to Pest Control and just have fun because it was a fun mini game, and we would enjoy it. And at least I didn't even know what Void Armor did and what it was. I just thought it was cool, and I got a couple of GP from it, and it was awesome. And the same with Castle Wars or Clan Wars or Soul Wars or whatever. They were fun and they were great, but they were just played for fun and entertainment. And whether you can either add in rewards for it that it would be worth it to play, but then again, people would feel tied to it. Like, you know, people sometimes don't want to spend all those hours on a mini game that is just repetitive over and over and over again, and it's very, very boring to do, and it's just fun to do a few times instead of like 100 or 200 games of like Pest Control. It gets stale and it gets boring, and if that's the way to get the best assault hybrid armor, then people would just not really enjoy it. And that's like the problem as well. Like, the player base has changed so much in what they do enjoy and what they do not enjoy, and I personally just think that Jagex should do what they set out to be. Just make new content, and if there's any old content, like for example with the Reaver's Ring and with the other rings, whatever, the Chandler's Ring, I think the other one is called, then there's another one with the Rex Matriarchs. Using the other rings, making Dagon of Kings slightly more relevant again, is a really good thing. I like how they did it because it makes sense, it's not forced, and it's kind of like a continuation on to the old content. Look at the Zuck Cape, you still need to get your Kiln Cape to get your Zuck Cape, and that does making it so that you will have to go through the kiln before you go do Zuck, because otherwise you can't really use those capes. And I do like it, even though it's tedious, it's good, and I think they should do it where it fits, like in those situations. But I don't feel like they should just be like, oh, you know what, Chromeda's outdated, let's just make it relevant by artificially pumping more content in it, because, you know, we want to rework it, so here's content. And look, I'm not against it, and if it makes sense and if they come up with something incredible, sure, do it, but in general, I don't think it's necessary. And that is just my opinion. So I'm very curious to see in the comment section down below what your opinion is on this subject. I think this is going to be a bit of a decisive video because people are really passionate about old content, and you know, a lot of people have been playing the game for over 10 years or 15 years or however long, and would love to see some of their memories come back to life. And same goes for me, don't get me wrong, I would see certain content, love to see that just be relevant again, but I also know the reality, and it's not gonna happen, unfortunately, and I hate it sometimes. And I think it's just better to move on and make it relevant if it's possible, and otherwise just let it rest in the past. But if you did enjoy this video, definitely go give it a like. If you, as I said, if you have an opinion, definitely go give it in the comment section down below. Subscribe if you're new. My name is Chevalric. I'll see you guys in my next video.